Even if there had been nothing else unusual about Breton nobleman Gilles de Rais, his outstanding career as a soldier in the Hundred Years' War and as a comrade in the arms of Joan of Arc would have been enough to guarantee his place in history. Today, though, those achievements can only be seen in the shadow of the secret life that he led as a perpetrator of more than 100 gruesome child murders, a rampage which made him arguably one of the first serial killers in recorded history. The early life of Gilles de Rais was marked by tragedy. Both his parents died in about 1415. His father, Guy de Laval, was killed in a gruesome hunting accident that de Rais may have witnessed, and his mother, Marie de Craon, died of an unknown cause. He was raised by his maternal grandfather, Jean de Craon. As a young man, de Rais seemed to have been very impetuous and hot-headed, characteristics that translated well to the battlefield, where he was by all accounts a skilled and fearless fighter. When Joan of Arc appeared on the scene in 1429, he was assigned by the Dauphin to watch over her in battle. The two fought bravely in several key battles, including those of Jargeau and Patay. They were side by side when the French army rescued the city of Orléans from an English siege in 1429. It proved to be a major turning point in the war and saw de Rais promoted to Marshal of France and attain invaluable status. Joan of Arc was captured and burned to death by the English on the 30th of May in 1431 in the city of Rouen. De Rais forged ahead in his military service and led the French army to a definite victory over the English in 1435. Ominously, he had already been murdering innocent children for 3 years. As Marshal, de Rais had been sending his servants to find and abduct peasant children since 1432. According to trial documents, he used secret rooms to sodomize them before bludgeoning them to death while staring into their eyes. Then, he decapitated their bodies and kept their severed heads on display, kissing his favorites from time to time. De Rais' bodyguard, known as Poitou, was an accomplice in many of the crimes, and testified that de Rais stripped children naked and hung them with ropes from a hook to prevent them from crying out, and then masturbated upon their belly or thighs. If the victim was a boy, he would touch his genitals and buttocks. Taking the victims down, de Rais comforted the children and assured them that he only wanted to play with them. Then he would either kill them himself, or have them killed by one of the bodyguards. The victims were killed by decapitation, cutting off their throats, dismemberment, or breaking of their necks with a stick. A short, thick, double-edged sword was kept at hand for the murders. Poitou further testified that de Rais sometimes abused the victims, whether they were boys or girls, before killing them. Poitou testified that he and another bodyguard burned the bodies in a fireplace in de Rais' room. The clothes of the victim were burned as well, piece by piece, so the smell was minimized. The ashes were then thrown into the cesspit, the moat, or another hiding place. On the 15th of May in 1440, de Rais kidnapped a cleric during a dispute at the church of Saint-Étienne de Mermort. The bold act prompted an investigation by the Bishop of Nantes, during which evidence of de Rais' crime was uncovered. On the 29th of July, the bishop released his findings, and he subsequently obtained the prosecutorial cooperation of de Rais' former protector, John VI, Duke of Brittany. De Rais and his bodyguard Poitou and Henriette were arrested on the 15th of September in 1440. De Rais' prosecution was likewise conducted by both secular as well as ecclesiastical courts, on charges that included murder, sodomy, and heresy. The extensive witness testimony convinced the judges that there were adequate grounds to establish the guilt of the accused. After de Rais admitted to the charges on the 21st of October in 1440, the court cancelled a plan to torture him into confessing. Peasants of neighboring villages had earlier begun to make accusations that their children had entered de Rais' castle begging for food and were never seen again. The transcript, which included testimony by the parents of many of the children, as well as graphic descriptions of the murders provided by de Rais' accomplices, was said to be so lurid that the judges ordered the worst parts to be struck from the record. The number of de Rais' victims is not known, as most of the bodies were burned or buried. The number of murders is generally placed between 100 and 200, and a few even claim that there were more than 600. The victims ranged in age from 6 to 18 and were predominantly male. On the 23rd of October in 1440, the court heard the confessions of Poitou and Henriette and condemned them both to death, followed by de Rais' death sentence on the 25th of October. De Rais was allowed to make a confession, and his request to be buried in the church of the monastery of Notre Dame des Carmes in Nantes was granted. Execution by hanging and burning was set for Wednesday the 26th of October. At 9 o'clock, de Rais and his two accomplices proceeded to the place of execution. De Rais is said to have addressed the crowd with contrite piety and encouraged Poitou and Henriette to die bravely and to think only of salvation. His request to be the first to die had been granted. At 11 o'clock, the brush at the platform was set alight, and de Rais was hanged. His body was cut down before being consumed by the flames and claimed by the quote, 4 ladies of high rank for burial. Henriette and Poitou were executed in similar fashion, but their bodies were reduced to ashes in the flames and then scattered. Although Gilles de Rais was convicted of murdering many children, by his own confessions as well as the detailed eyewitness accounts of his own confederates and victims' parents, doubts have long persisted about the verdict. Counter-arguments are based on the theory that de Rais himself was a victim of an elaborate plot or act of revenge by the Catholic Church or French state. In his 2006 book, The World of Preservation, Psychoanalysis and the Impossible Absolute of Desire, psychoanalyst James Douglas Penny notes that the Duke of Brittany, who was given the authority to prosecute, received all the titles to de Rais' former lands after his conviction, and then divided the land among his own nobles. In November of 1992, lawyer Jean Brezonière organized an ad hoc at the Luxembourg Palace to re-examine the source material and the evidence available at the medieval trial. A team consisting of lawyers, writers, former French ministers, parliament members, a biologist and a medical doctor, led by writer Gilbert Proteau, and presided over by Judge Henri Jérôme, found Gilles de Rais not guilty. But as contemporary French news and academic commentators reported, none of the participants sought professional advice from qualified medievalists. The proceedings were in part turned into a fictionalized biography called Gilles de Rais, or The Mouth of the Wolf, narrated by the writer Gilbert Proteau. The case for Gilles de Rais' innocence is very strong, Proteau said as reported by The Guardian, noting that no child's corpse was ever found in the castle, and that in Proteau's view, de Rais appeared to have confessed to escape excommunication. He concludes that the accusations appear to have been, quote, false charges made up by powerful rival lords to benefit from the confiscation of his lands, end quote. In one last attempt at irony, a tradition emerged in which parents around Nantes commemorated the anniversary of de Rais' execution by whipping their children. This was thought to impress upon them the gravity of the sins for which he had repented. This practice is believed to have survived for more than a century after his death. Until next time.